More and more I dig into the fuel crisis and the gas export issue, the weirder and weirder it gets. This is probably the closest I've ever been to wearing a tinfoil hat in my life. But going through Instagram a couple of days ago, and our beloved Prime Minister Albo put up something on his own personal account, which I'll get to in a second. We're working hard to secure more fuel and shield Australians from the worst impacts of the war in the Middle East. So just rewinding a little bit second there, it wasn't an official government webpage or I suppose a social media page from the Australian government. It primarily came from Albo. And the purpose of that was probably to try and say, hey, look, Albo's doing stuff. Albo's good to go. It's the Albanese government. We're working hard. I'm kind of skeptical of that. Albo probably isn't doing it. But what I liked seeing is people holding him to account. And I've said numerous times through these videos, I'm trying to work out things that don't necessarily make sense. And what I'd love to see is people hold the government accountable. I'm not politically aligned with anyone. I'm not One Nation. I'm not Labor, Liberal, or anyone in particular. I vote on policies. But reading the comments reinstates my, I suppose, my faith in humanity. So we have had numerous people, and I'll flag it up on the screen now, tax the gas big fella. One from Joey. This is the kind of the basis of the video. I had this idea plotted out before I read the comments section, but Joey has hit the nail on the head for what I'm going to be talking about in this video. So arriving into. So this is what he's basically looking at Albo's words or what's not being said and kind of picking it apart. And this is what I'm hoping to do in this video. Arriving into. Let's break that part down. Arriving into means transiting from A to B. That period of time when it arrives at port is not calculated into the arriving part. Waiting in international waters until prices are acceptable for the shipping companies so they can make a profit off it. I don't really go that far into the tinfoil hat conspiracy, but what I'm looking at is primarily what's not being said. So what Albo is basically saying is we've got more boats coming in. He's got a little infograph stating month by month fuel ship arrivals. It's not fuel. This is the thing that I'm looking at in this video, is that he's saying X amount of ships arrived on this date, X amount of ships arrived in this month. What he's saying is ships, not fuel. We've discussed this before. Australia goes through 100 million litres of diesel a day. I think about 50 or 35 to 50 million litres of jet fuel a day. So we're not saying, hey, look, we're getting, in May, we're getting 75 days worth of fuel. We're getting 20 days of fuel, all these different things. We're just talking about ships. And what it comes down to is that extracting that language and kind of giving some data, but with not giving it any context, is, to me, kind of pulling the wool over the Australian public's eyes. People don't deep dive into this to see, all right, cool, what does this physically mean? Because yes, there may be X amount of ships coming through. However, that doesn't necessarily mean the entire contents of that ship is coming to Australia. So we are only pre-allocated a certain amount. So if a ship could contain 100 million litres of diesel, for example, we may be only allocated 20 million, but for the purpose of his graph and to try, entice the Australian public that everything's Team Albo and everything's good to go, is that he counts it as one. So to see that upward trajectory of ships coming in, getting more excited because they're saying, hey, look, there's more fuel coming in. That doesn't necessarily mean that's the case. So it's all wordplay, and it's really, 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 really bugging me. And it's good to see people in the comment section that are calling this out and actually directing focus to the gas export tax, which he has squashed. He has been talking a lot of gas lobbyist talking points, not using his own government's data. Is basically almost verbatim for what the gas companies are handing him for the talking points, which is very disappointing and quite evident in this comment section on Instagram. But comment section in this post on Instagram isn't uploaded by Albanese himself. It's uploaded by probably political staffers or a social media team and all these different things. So he, probably is not going to see this Instagram post in any capacity. And I can tell you right now, he's not getting the comments, nor is he probably getting the feedback from those comments. So it's almost like a waste of breath reading and trying to respond to him. But it's good, from a devil's advocate point of view, is that people putting those comments on and people like myself seeing them, it kind of gets that conversation flowing and hopefully further afield, so it actually does get back to the government, that they work for us, not, not gas lobbyists or anyone else. But what I'm going to show you quite quickly is the marine traffic website, a couple of screenshots that I took earlier this morning. This is where it gets a little bit crazy. So I will show you a global view. I have made it darker, but if you see the little red ticks or the little red arrows, they're all tankers. Generally speaking, a majority of these tankers would be oil or fuel, not necessarily all of them. It's primarily what we're looking at. We're looking at it from a fuel perspective or an oil perspective. So I will zoom in on the Strait of Hormuz in a second, but what we can see forming is there's actually quite a strong line coming from the United States across to, I suppose, processing plants that we've got in Malaysia, in South Korea, China, and also Japan from memory, Singapore. So I'm kind of spinning this around is that maybe Australia is not the only country that has a gas export problem or their citizens not capitalizing on their natural resources. Because if I was a conspiracy theorist, it looks really suspicious. There's strong lines coming from the United States, and there is a lot of backup traffic around the Gulf states where the oil originates from. So the oil in the Gulf states is about 20% of the worldwide supply, but there is a very, very, very thick line coming from the United States out to the world. So is there a correlation between the two? You can make it out from there. But what we'll do now is we'll quickly have a look at the Strait of Hormuz. This is pretty much what the issue is at the moment. There's a little bit of a cluster on the right. This is where all the tankers are probably waiting at the blockade, trying to get through, collect the cargo or the oil in this sense, and drag it out and go from that perspective. But if we dig a little bit further in, you can actually see there is a lot of backed up traffic in this area. There's going to be a lot more flow-on effects. Like people have talked about before, fertilizer, they've talked about oil, primarily because there's one choke point in the world. And going back closer to home, we've actually got something that's kind of plays off the back of Albanese's statements in regards to these tankers arriving in Australia. So looking around the Asia Pacific area where we do have our fuel refinery plants, like I said, South Korea, Singapore, Malaysia, China, Japan, all these different places, they process the oil into fuel, then they ship it out to their respective customers. You can see there's lots of boats floating around in that area and doing all those different things. However, there's not much traffic coming to Australia. It's quite deceiving from this perspective, and the reason why I'm bringing it up for is that I hope that it won't transpire, but this is something the Australian government may use as a demonstration piece to say, hey, look at all these little red dots, the fuel cargo ships coming to us. It's just really eye-opening to see what's going on behind the scenes. But